Another series win under Dan Wilson and shots fired at team president Jerry Dipoto. All coming up on a new episode of Bleav in Mariners. That is right. What's up, sports fans? What is up, Mariners fans? Jordan Schultz, more affectionately known as Schultzy, back for episode 2 of Bleav in Mariners, fresh off of a 4-2 homestand and fresh off of the second series win under new manager Dan Wilson, getting it done before the off day on Thursday that the Mariners have this week. A 6-2 win over the Tampa Bay Rays to win the series. Unfortunately, though, a little bit of struggles for the Mariners winning on the same day that the Phillies were losing, because Tuesday night that didn't quite happen for them. The Phillies got shut out and the Mariners were not able to get it done themselves. Very frustrating. Their bats pretty quiet. They had 9 or 10 strikeouts in that game. So pretty frustrated to see that the opportunity there for them to get to 2.5 games within first place of the AL West was not taken advantage of. However, the next day, unfortunately, the Mariners had to win to stay within 3.5 of first place, because I believe it was Spencer Arrighetti is how I Bleav you say his name, through a no-hitter for the Houston Astros, and obviously shut out the Philadelphia Phillies. So the Mariners still sitting at 3.5 games behind the Astros for first place in the AL West. But some very positive things to take away from this 4-2 homestand, and now 2 full series under Dan Wilson's belt. Now you're on to a 10-game road trip. So we're going to look ahead. We're also going to kind of react to how great and how bad at different times the Mariners did during that series, and getting into not only, some numbers from that, good and bad, but want to get to some reaction on an article that was posted by Danny O'Neill for the Tacoma Tribune. Basically, huge shots fired at Mariners president, and I was about to call him general manager, but that's Justin Hollander, even though nobody really listens to him or cares about what he's got to say. Sorry, Justin, but we all know that this stuff's coming from Jerry Dipoto, then to you. You're not really making any of these personnel decisions. But apparently, according to Danny O'Neill, sources within the organization telling him that Jerry Dipoto is just a flat-out jerk. So we got to react to that. I've got some things to say. I think a lot of Mariners fans are pretty frustrated about hearing that their general manager is kind of a jerk and the communication within the organization is terrible, and it's kind of a bully, it seems like, at least reportedly, allegedly, at the top of our favorite team. So we'll get into reaction there. And then also a great interview by the Marine Layer Pod, Ryan Divish with the Seattle Times, on with them, talking about some crazy offseason Mariners news involving the batter's eye being changed. Sounds like that's definitely been a problem for years up at T-Mobile Park and Safeco Field, all the way back to like Mike Cameron and Richie Sexson complaining about it. Obviously, we heard Teoscar Hernandez complaining about it earlier in this season. So Ryan Divish saying that the Mariners are going to address the batter's eye problems. It's basically possibly crooked, so we'll get into that. And then also some other big bits of news in that interview Ryan Divish did with Marine Layer Pod, essentially saying that the Mariners are going to make some massive offseason trades, and I don't think you're all going to like what we're going to talk about. It's not some good names, and by not good names, I mean like some of the biggest names possibly on their way out of Seattle this offseason, which to me makes this playoff run under new manager Dan Wilson even more important. So, all right, kind of reacting to this 4-2 homestand. I mean, what a performance. Bryce Miller, what a gritty performance by him. Had a 1.99 ERA since July 10th going into his start. That was third lowest in the majors, went 7 innings, 10 strikeouts on Monday. So obviously the good there. Cal Raleigh in Wednesday's win became the second catcher in team history to have 80 RBIs. He's, I Bleav, the second catcher after Dan Wilson to have 80 RBIs for the Seattle Mariners. So really, really awesome to see that he is getting basically the normal numbers that we can expect from Cal Raleigh. I think him and Luke Raley are kind of like the only two guys that have performed like we expect them to perform, essentially. I know we all want Cal Raleigh, his batting average, to be a little bit better, but he's still super productive, even if he is like a 200, 210 hitter. And then obviously Luke Raley coming in. I mean, in the last, 10 to 15 days, I think he's hitting like 260. And that's obviously been a nice heat up for him lately. But you kind of expect him to hit like 230, 240, near 20 home runs. And he's at 233 right now, 16 ribbies, 43 RBIs, a 741 OPS. So I would say that's pretty standard as far as what you're going to get out of Luke Raley. And then there's been some bright spots. I know like the numbers as far as like Dylan Moore's batting average don't necessarily jump off the page. He's pretty horrible in some at bats. I know he swings at pitches he shouldn't, but he's also super fast on the base pass. I Bleav he had 3 stolen bases in one game during this homestand. And that's something that is, I know that there are Mariners fans that are just like, oh my gosh, the Dipoto service team loves them some Dylan Moore. And now that Dan Wilson's there, maybe they won't love him so much. Well, that's not true, because no, Dylan Moore is a gritty baseball player, and he kind of represents, in my opinion, the gritty feel now that this team has, that they've moved on to new manager Dan Wilson from Scott's service. You hear, I Bleav the first game that the Mariners had under Dan Wilson, right before that, they had a team meeting, and Josh Rojas had said to like Angie Mentink or Shannon Dreyer before the game, saying, you know what, got me a little fired up. And that quote was from Dan Wilson, like, get ready to go to war every night. And you can tell these guys really are playing a lot grittier now. So I like to see that. I like to see, you know, at least the 2 players that we've got on our roster producing normally. But going on to the problems, unfortunately, gosh, man, Julio Rodriguez, 1 of 18 going into Wednesday's game. Thankfully, the entire outfield kind of able to get off the schneid, each hitting a home run. Victor Robles, Julio Rodriguez, and Randy Arozarena going yard. And it was so beautiful to see. That's like the premier outfield that you think is going to take the Mariners to the playoffs. And when they hit like they did, that is what's going to happen. You're finally getting those like great clutch home runs, 2-run bombs with a great pitching performance. It doesn't matter when Luis Castillo gives up a solo home run in the first inning, when you know that you're going to get some bombs, you know you're going to get some production later in the game. And that's something earlier in the season Mariners fans have really had to be concerned about. It's like, Luis, you're giving up 2 or 3 solo home runs. I mean, on a normal start, that's like on a team that can hit, that's not too terrible. I mean, I'd rather a pitcher give up like a few hits and 2 solo jacks than having to constantly deal with like runners on base and getting out of trouble. I think it's a bit easier to just, you know what, give up that solo home run and move on, right? And it's nice to see when the hitters support the pitchers. The statistically worst hitting team compared to the statistically best pitching team in Major League history has basically been torturing itself. And what you saw in the win against the Rays on Wednesday was how a winning team should work, but how the Mariners specifically can actually run when their best hitters are hitting. Sucks that you had to see Mitch Garver play. That is one thing I don't like, man. I get it. He's a backup catcher now, and I would be shocked if Dan Wilson ever gave him any at-bats besides at backup catcher the rest of the season. I feel like these are too important of an at-bat at this point. But essentially a great series win for the Mariners, and you had the 6th time this season in that Wednesday game that the Mariners hit 2 home runs in the same inning on Wednesday against the Rays. So just a lot of production really to be happy about, at least in their 2 wins, but it's still not every game that the Mariners are showing up to the plate. And I think that's really frustrating for fans out there. We talk about the loss on Tuesday. Once again, near double-digit strikeouts. Why can't their approach remain consistent from day to day? And frankly, you talk about like Julio 1 for 18 coming into Wednesday's game. Somebody put a great video out there on Twitter or on X of basically all the pitches that Julio had swung at this homestand, and he was not balanced for any of them. He was literally off balance, whiffing at a corner slider or a fastball out of the zone just about every single time. But apparently, I don't know if Edgar said the right thing to him, but Wednesday he was able to get his head right, and he hit his 12th homer of the season. It's almost kind of odd that Julio hits a homer. It feels like it's like really weird to watch nowadays, but it's awesome. And you hope that traditionally in August and September, that is when he has had his best days. And hopefully he will be able to continue that trend going into September for this season. If he does, yeah, you think the Mariners 3.5 out right now going into September, I would say have a pretty good shot to get into the playoffs. Looking though, once again, it is, a limited amount of time. To quote Jack Bauer from 24, we're running out of time. Thankfully, though, the Mariners looking ahead have the 5th easiest schedule for the rest of the season. You're going to Anaheim this weekend to play against the Angels, and you've got the Cardinals for 3. You've got the Athletics for 3 as well. 7 total games against the Texas Rangers, and then a couple of harder series, I would say, against the Padres and the New York Yankees. A 2-game set against the Padres, and then the 3-game set in the middle of the month against the New York Yankees. However, that is at T-Mobile Park. I love this new way of scheduling. It's pretty cool that you get to see New York in Seattle in September. I don't think that ever would have happened under the old AL-NL split league style of scheduling. And then, of course, to wrap up the season, you've got the 3 against the Astros. That is in Houston. That is the hugest series, I think, remaining on your schedule, because obviously you can make up the most ground when you're playing the team that you are directly competing against, and then 3 more against Oakland. So 7 against Texas, 7 against Oakland for the rest of the season. And as far as the Houston Astros go, they've got the 10th hardest schedule remaining for the rest of the year. So there is a chance, Seattle Mariners fans, there is a chance. Let's hope that Raley and Raleigh can continue to hit like normal, and we can actually get some above average play from Julio Rodriguez. I mean, technically, I think average at this point would be great. And Josh Rojas can start hitting, and we can actually get some big, more consistent bombs. I feel like Haniger's been turning it on as of late, but dude really needs to have a hot September. And hopefully the vibes in the locker room right now. I talked about it in episode 1 of Bleav in Mariners, how much I love the new team under Dan Wilson, the grit, the way that this team feels, the way that they look in the clubhouse and in the dugout now. Just seems like there's a lot more juice. There's a better vibe than there was under Scott Service. And that is honestly, I feel like a change, because there was a great vibe under Scott Service. During their playoff run, they looked like they were one of the happiest and closest teams in baseball. You've heard JP Crawford several times talk about how everybody really, when you come to Seattle, you've got like a buy-in mentality that most players really seem to take on and take it on with vigor, and that has helped establish a great culture. But one thing, unfortunately, when you're talking about culture, and we can shift into this, of course, once again, the Mariners coming up here on the road off Thursday, but on the road Friday, starting in Anaheim against the Angels for a 3-game set. Hopefully they can go 3-0, and hopefully the Astros can at least lose 1 so they can make up some ground as they go into September and maybe be just 2.5 back of Houston. They're really in it. If you're 2 or 3 games away from first place with a month to play, you are absolutely in it. And honestly, there's more than light at the end of the tunnel. But really, one big note about the culture actually came out via an article in the Tacoma Tribune earlier this week, the Tacoma News Tribune, talking about the piece that Danny O'Neill did for the News Tribune. And, was it an eye-opener? Let's just dive into this really quick, and I'll give you my thoughts. Here's the headline, just a thought, but maybe the thin-skinned GM is the real problem for the Mariners. I mean, shots fired right from the headline basically goes on to say, Danny O'Neill, according to sources telling him that it ain't easy working for Jerry Dipoto, that Jerry Dipoto isn't very much liked by the players, doesn't really communicate too well to people in the organization. We'd heard that. I think Kyle Seager, Mariners' legendary third baseman, before he retired, had said he hadn't talked or had a conversation with GM Jerry Dipoto at that time in 3 or 4 seasons leading up to his exit from the Mariners. That's a problem. And it would not only tell me that this is how he treats players, but this is most likely how he treats people up in the front offices with him as well. And it just doesn't sound like he's a very easy dude to work with. We'll cite a couple of examples, one of which that Danny O'Neill had sources telling him about. Essentially, this was in Jerry Dipoto's first year as the general manager. There was basically and the article doesn't say if it's like an HR-led initiative or not. Basically, there was like a survey given to employees trying to help managers and executives improve the way that they communicated with everybody and the way that they ran the organization. And, there were some things that were anonymously said about managers and executives in these reports that were obviously then looked at, by people that were told, hey, maybe you can do this a little bit better. And instead of, Jerry Dipoto wanting to learn from anything, he essentially reacts by asking who made the criticisms. And then the president at the time, Kevin Mather, who has his own problems, as we all know. Don't let him on a Zoom call. At the time, had to tell Dipoto, this is directly from the article, that the point of the exercise was to try to learn from the feedback rather than push back against it. So we're talking, almost a decade ago, Jerry Dipoto essentially coming in. There's an anonymous survey done of employees that say, hey, how can we work better with you? How can we interact better with you? Maybe some slightly negative things are said about Jerry Dipoto. And instead of wanting to look inside at himself, he wants to say, oh, screw you. Who said this? I don't like dissent. We're not going to have that here. And frankly, that if that is true, there's no reason to believe it's not. That is a major problem. And it just sucks. I mean, on a personal note, and I think a lot of fans agree with me on this. I feel like I saw this sentiment on X after this article was released. And it is a pretty damning article by Danny O'Neill. Really, really good stuff. Appreciate it. I think I got to get him on the podcast to talk to me more about this. But really, on a personal note, it honestly, it hurt my feelings that my favorite team is being run by such a jackass. It hurt my feelings that my favorite team has what sounds like a bully at the top of the organization. The article goes on to have a couple of anonymous quotes from players basically stating that Jerry Dipoto doesn't talk to anybody. He doesn't care about his players. He sits up in his high rise and he treats all of us like widgets. And then I think another quote was like, it's hard to believe that he was a former player the way that he treats players right now. So sounds like a very bully-esque, more robot-like approach to doing this job from Mariners President Jerry Dipoto than the personable, normal, everyday, approachable guy. That sucks, man. I'll tell you what, that really sucks. It's frustrating to hear players feeling so betrayed by the person that runs their organization and brings them in. You understand, deals have to be made. We all love to call Jerry Trader Jerry at this point because he's basically like the old Blazers general manager Bob Whitsitt, who we called Trader Bob in the back in the day, always making deals, always doing something. And I think by far, since Jerry Dipoto took over, the Mariners have made the most trades of any team in Major League Baseball. It's not even close. But when it sounds like there's really no respect within the organization while you're doing that, and it's not like this is the only report that we've heard. Obviously, the Kyle Seager comments, and then as we saw when Scott Service got fired last week, his best friend, apparently in baseball and in life, was not even able to tell him without Scott finding out the news on a social media crawl. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about the organization, right? And then you see this damning article from Danny O'Neill for the Tacoma News Tribune. You don't really have any questions remaining in your head as to why the Mariners are not a playoff organization every single season, right? It's super frustrating when hubris rules all, and you kind of don't really realize it until it's too late. And I feel like that has happened now with the Mariners' last three general managers, going back to Bill Bavasi. I Bleav maybe, and I remember his exit interview. The fact that they let him do an exit interview was kind of awesome. And I think he called, Eric Bedard's answer stupid as far as why he wouldn't want to pitch. You could kind of see into the window of Bill Bavasi kind of dealing with it a little bit. It's not going how I thought it would. And yeah, we all thought he made a stupid trade with Adam Jones and Chris Tillman going to the Baltimore Orioles, essentially proven to be a stupid trade because Eric Bedard was not the ace that the Mariners wanted him to be. And Adam Jones went on to hit a ton of home runs and be a franchise player for the Orioles for years. But at least you saw that, he was struggling, but thought that he was doing the right things, and really was kind of in the effort of trying to do the right things meant by either really crappy player effort or something that he couldn't control. In the Jerry Dipoto situation, it's something that he can control. It's his own hubris. With Jack Zduriencik, I felt like it was the same thing. It was his hubris. There were rumors that I Bleav Jeff Baker wrote a great article a few years back about his resume, Jack Zduriencik resume, basically being allegedly forged by one of his assistant GMs for the Milwaukee Brewers at the time, or one of his underlings for the Milwaukee Brewers that he brought on to be assistant GM for the Mariners, because essentially at the time it was kind of a hot commodity in baseball. If you were like an analytics-based general manager or analytics candidate for the general manager job, Jack Zduriencik was kind of more of an old school baseball guy, didn't really know, reportedly, this is allegedly, about the analytics side of the game, but had his resume doctored to make the Mariners believe that he had that experience. And it was proven, oh my goodness, that he did not even lean on analytics close to the level that he should have when he was in Seattle, and honestly didn't really even do the homework that he needed to do when they acquired like a former sex offender in a trade as a pitcher from the Texas Rangers. And it just kind of spoke more to the hubris of the general manager at the top of the team. And I feel like, once again, here we are as Mariners fans. I know that you don't always need like a nice guy running things, but you do need somebody that's personable in that position. Yeah, you need somebody that's ruthless, but not to the players, ruthless to other teams. If you're treating all of those players just like you are executives on the phone, it's never going to go well. Players hate you. You see it. And the unbelievable criticism coming here from different sources in the organization to Danny O'Neill in that article. I mean, it's a great insight into the team. It's frustrating. I hate to see that that's who's running the organization. You wonder if Jerry Dipoto will ever be let go, especially if the Mariners have a bit of success. But it doesn't sound like that we're going to see a change anytime soon. Dan Wilson, we're getting the feels from him. I even am. I'll admit it. My Mariners bias is kicking in, but I just don't think that there's a world looking forward, and even after this article, where I see Jerry Dipoto just being gotten rid of unless unless John Stanton reads this himself and is like, yeah, you know what? I don't want this guy running my team. But that's not going to happen. It's been way too long of an investment. I know Jerry Dipoto has an option for next year, and if Wilson has like a decent month as Mariners manager, I don't see why John Stanton wouldn't exercise that option. So as frustrating as it is, unfortunately, y'all, I think we just kind of have to sit back and continue to take this and even further into just kind of taking the Mariners' crappy approach to trying to win games and trying to get to the playoffs. We heard on the Marine Layer pod, Ryan Divish talking to those guys about some offseason plans that the Mariners are going to make. And one of those, kind of a positive, is the batter's eye possibly being fixed because of the comments made by many former players, but most recently Teoscar Hernandez for the LA Dodgers, talking about how he never felt comfortable batting at T-Mobile Park. Just kind of a crooked line to the pitcher's mound from the batter's box, never really felt aligned. And that is reportedly seeing complaints from other players because of the batter's eye being crooked itself. And there's kind of some talk, you can kind of go find it on the internet, where you see people kind of describing the bleachers in right field leaking over a little bit into the right side of the batter's eye, kind of making that crooked, but it also is not actually straight on, apparently, from what I've been reading. And that's just unbelievably crazy to me. But it is something that the Mariners can fix. It's not like, they can control what free agents want to sign with them. They can't do that. That there are so many things out of their control, like the marine air. It's just, you got to deal with it, right? But one thing that you can control is a batter's eye. So it does sound like they're going to fix that. That's good. But one pretty scary bit of news from that Marine Layer pod episode with Ryan Divish, and go check him out, guys. They really do good work. Honestly, I'm just trying to add to the fun and all this content, doing my own Mariners show here on Bleav in Mariners. But Ryan Divish making some pretty bold statements about possible trades the Mariners are going to make this offseason. They are involving two very, very big players. One, a starting pitcher, saying the Mariners, essentially operating like a small market budget team, aren't going to go and spend a ton of money on an offseason hitter. That's not what they've done for the last few years. What's the best way for them to do that? Trade their starting pitching, trade their surplus, and possibly Logan Gilbert. That scares the hell out of me. But when you look at the logic of the situation, talking about Logan Gilbert's salary going up, making $4 million this year, going to be making near 10 next year, then he's going to be making 15. I mean, this is kind of what you're looking at with this perfect, cheap, young rotation with Seattle right now. And it's also why it's so frustrating why Jerry Dipoto hasn't been able to get his ass together and get hitters into the lineup and essentially always try to trot a lineup out there that's one full-time batter short. The rotating DH the years before and now into this season with the Josh Rojas, Luis Urias platoon, that it just didn't work out. And it's clear to Ryan Divish that they are not going to spend the money to acquire a free agent hitter. So, yeah, they're going to have to let somebody go. I mean, is it Logan Gilbert? He's probably going to be the most expensive, the quickest. I think Luis Castillo is an option as well, although he's, I would say, a pretty decent, controllable salary. I mean, 20 to 25 million bucks for a starting pitcher. Honestly, in the bigs, that's a good rate. That is a cheap rate at this point. A lot of the top line guys are getting 35 to 40 million, and I don't see the Mariners ever paying anybody to pitch for them that much. But if you want to get a hitter, the Mariners' philosophy has limited them from spending money, so it sounds like they've got to give up one of their best arms. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. As a fan, it just makes me want to scream, but I guess I understand the position that they're in. And if the team has to operate this way, then, I mean, honestly, it is what it is. It really sucks to lose one of those guys, but they do need another hitter at this point. And I think it's probably more feasible that they can go sign, a middle of the line rotation guy after trading a big name starting pitcher, as opposed to trying to go get a big name hitter. But then in the same interview with Marine Layer Pod, Ryan Divish talking about the Mariners pretty much planning on trimming payroll again, or if they do, they're going to move on from Randy Arozarena. They just acquired him at the deadline to try to make a run to the playoffs. You understand that, he hasn't actually produced like you would like him to. I think in the last 15 days, he's hitting like $170. It's not great, although the home run on Wednesday, along with both the other outfielders and Julio and Victor Robles, is exactly what you want to see. So I don't know, going forward, if he has a great month, is this tone going to change? You don't want to see a great clutch hitter traded, even if he's having a down month, coming into an organization, that's batting philosophy is flawed. I'm not sure you can really blame Arozarena for that. It's scary to me that this team is even considering, already a bat short, giving up because you are so scared about a small amount of money on a potentially game-changing, World Series changing bat. Dude is clutch. Yes, he's been terrible for the past few weeks, but he is usually clutch. You can't give up on guys like that. And you can't, just because you're still striking out, say, well, I guess he's not the answer. I guarantee you he will go on and have success with another team if the Mariners give him up. And frankly, they're not going to give much. They're not going to get much if they have to give him up. So I hope neither of those trades happen. But some pretty scary news from Ryan Divish on the Marine Layer Pod. Really, really great interview with him, but wanted to react to a couple of those things and just kind of give my thoughts and talk about how scared I am that could happen. Let me know, guys, how you're feeling. You can hit me up on YouTube in the comments below, or you can find me on Twitter or X, whatever you call it, on the Air Jordan. And still out to a former Mariners player, still trying to find a co-host for this show. Would absolutely love to get some true insight. And I think, honestly, the show's just going to be a ton better once I can get a former Mariners player to join this awesome show with Bleav. And that's going to do it for this episode of Bleav in Mariners. Make sure to give the podcast a 5-star rating and review, or subscribe to the channel and like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay safe and keep those tridents up, Mariners fans. See you soon.